welcome everybody to Grow Yourself, a podcast, which our mission, our desire is to have meaningful conversations with interesting, successful people, if you will. Not necessarily successful people, but just really interesting and accomplished people. And hopefully to pass on some wisdom about how we can all grow ourselves from the inside out. I mean, that's sort of the concept that I'm working with here. And I hope that as you listen and watch, that you do gain some ideas about how to improve your life, whether it be skills, whether it be your mindset, whether it be your spirituality, whatever the case might be. And so listen, today I have a very special guest. I'm going to tell you about him in just a second. But before I do, whether you're watching live or if you're listening on the podcast later or the recording later on, I would love for you, even in the midst of as we go along here, if you have ideas about topics that you would like to learn more about or that you would like to hear being discussed, it really doesn't matter. Just any type of life, personal growth, spiritual growth, professional growth type topics, please, just put them in the chat box or in the post it on Facebook or whatever the case might be, and I would we'd just love to look at them and take them into consideration. So today my guest is bobbylewis. Now, there's a real story behind how I met Bobby, and I'm going to tell you that in a minute. But before I do, let me just tell you a little bit about him. First of all, Bobby's a very accomplished professional in a number of fields, I guess you could say. He's a media executive. He's also a media consultant. He's an entrepreneur, has built a business, and he's also a very successful musician, which we will ask him about that as well. And then finally, he's also now a student at McCormick Theological Seminary. So, and there's an interesting sort of side story about that as well that I'll tell you about when I tell you the story. He lives in the South Side of Chicago with his wife Crystal and 3 kids. And he's just a really, really interesting person with an incredible amount of wisdom. And but let me tell you the story before I bring Bobby on here. So it's probably been 3, 4, maybe 5 years ago. I was flying to Chicago, and I think I went Nashville to Atlanta, and then Atlanta to Chicago. And I had some business up there. In any event, I was sitting on the airplane as we were boarding in Atlanta, and most of the plane was full. I was one of the earlier ones to get on, and so there was just, I think, a handful of people still to come on. And as you all know, who travel or whatever, especially if you do travel, though, you treasure the empty seat next to you. And so I was sitting on the aisle, and there was a gentleman sitting, I believe, over on the window side, and then the middle, of course, was empty. And so I was just like, sometimes you get so snobby about that, you actually pray to God that, somebody just keeps walking, So then Bobby comes on, and I see him. I'm sitting pretty close to the front, and I see him. And Bobby's a pretty big guy. He's, pretty buff, and he came on. I think it was around the wintertime, I believe, because I think he had a coat on. In any case, so I just, tried to not look at him to see if he would just keep on walking, and I'd keep my little empty seat. And then I heard this very gentle voice, sir, is that seat taken? I said, no. And so I got up, and he sits down, and as he sits down, he sat down, and then he tried to get back up and take his coat off, and I tried to help him take his coat off. And and there's a principle there, but I'll keep going with the story and just get through it real quickly. But that whole kind of just that very brief interaction sparked a conversation. And so it was about an hour plus flight from Atlanta to Chicago. And it was almost immediately that Bobby and I got enthralled in this really, I'm just going to say spiritual conversation. It just started off with, hey, I'm, what do you do? And this, that, and the other. And it just really quickly evolved into a beautiful but incredible conversation. Now, that's, of course, my take on it. and but it was so meaningful, I think, for both of us on a number of levels. But in any event, he started telling me a little bit about him. He said that he used to be a musician. Well, he still is a musician, but he talked about that he used to live in LA for 15 years, and now he's living in Chicago. And he played for some pretty big artists, which I'll ask him about in a little bit. But so anyways, we just started talking, and as we started, and most of you all know I'm a musician as well. I'm not an accomplished musician, but I'm a decent musician, been doing it for a while, so I kind of, I know at least enough to be able to, sound like I know what I'm talking about. So anyways, we just had this really nice conversation. And but throughout the conversation, as he was telling me about his life, he mentioned his father several times. And he talked about his father being a jazz musician and that he was just this sort of real traditionalist. And I don't want to speak, I can't. I'm thinking about this, about sort of what he said, and it was something to the effect of that, his dad was kind of tough relative to music, I guess. And I'll ask him for clarification. I may have just expanded the story, but essentially, because he went and played for some rap artists and this, that, and the other. But he mentioned his father several times about just how traditionally he was with music and this, that, and the other, and so forth and on and on. So in any event, we continued through the conversation. There's much more to tell you, but I'm just going to get to the end of it. And so then, as we're pulling into the gate in Chicago, we continued talking, and I said, hey, I don't know, we probably say I'd love to sing soft. Maybe I gave him a card or something like that, and then I said, hey, by the way, does your dad have any YouTube videos? I mean, is there somewhere that I can go see him? I love jazz, and he said, oh, and he said this rather matter of factly. He said, yeah, he's got 70 or 80 albums, and okay, so having at least been around long enough, I remember I sat back and I thought, this dude's either lying to me or something's going on here, because who has 70 or 80 albums? Just some random person playing, at clubs, jazz at clubs or something, And this is what was in my head. He goes, oh, I said 70, 80 albums. I said, yeah. He goes, yeah. I said, what's his name? He said Ramsey Lewis. I almost fell into the aisle. I was like, excuse me, what did you say? He said, yeah, Ramsey Lewis, that's my dad. I said, man, you cannot be serious here. And then quietly, I'll just tell you, and I'm about to introduce Bobby. But having said that, I also told him right at the end of the conversation what was so crazy about the ending of this conversation. I told him that just before I joined the military, I was living up in Bowling Green, Kentucky. I worked as a janitor actually at an arena, at the university arena, where they also had concerts. And they always, because you work there, especially as a janitor, anytime they had a concert there, they said, listen, if you want to work backstage and meet the artists or whatever, you're welcome to do that. We usually get people to come in, just volunteer and yada, yada, yada. I said, yeah, great, because I was a musician. I loved to watch it. And I do remember, and I knew nothing about jazz. Zero. I grew up listening to country, my dad, and sort of folk, James Taylor, that kind of stuff. But whatever the case might be, I knew zero about jazz. But I remember they offered me to work backstage for a jazz artist coming to town named Ramsey Lewis. I had no idea who he was, but I was there for the sound check. And I remember I was standing about maybe 10 or 15 feet away. They had obviously a grand piano up there, and he started playing for sound check. And again, I didn't know anything about jazz, but I knew what I was hearing was freaking mind blowing. I was like, who is this dude? And that was my introduction to jazz. How do you bring these two things together? Here, 30 something years later, I meet the son of the man who introduced me to jazz. I didn't get to talk to Mr. Lewis, but just was amazed by what I heard during sound check and this, that, and the other. So anyways, that's but I'm going to say this. Bobby is an extraordinarily, because this conversation is really about him and Joy, but he's an extraordinarily accomplished professional in his own right, and we're going to talk about him. So if you would, you can clap in your head or whatever. I'd like to just bring on Bobby Lewis. Bobby, I told you this before, man. It's just It's just a pleasure. I've told you many times that I've never forgotten that conversation because it was a different level, and that's why I call it spiritual. And so, listen, welcome to Grow Yourself podcast, brother.
Yeah, bro, thanks for having me, man. I feel the same way about the conversation, man. It was one of those moments where, we were transparent, learned a lot
Yes.
about each other. Um, but it just unforgettable, like just really pierced the soul. And it was a really rich dialogue. And, the, I think we were talking about, because with my dad, I was talking about influences, and we were talking about
Mm,
how we reached certain, destinations and places in our lives. And
yes.
we were talking about music, and Pops has always been a big influence on me. But I always refer to him as Dad and Pops. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's not, it's just like any other father. So
Yeah.
it's just
Yeah.
so
No, I get
happened.
it. Well, I mean, but I will also say that, I just call it humility that you didn't just kind of. I think if I don't know, I'd probably say his name right off the bat just to let you know I'm Ramsey Lewis's son, before we get this conversation. I'm just kidding, but you were very humble about it and really never mentioned his name until I asked you. So listen, before we kind of get into this conversation and about joy, which you bring really, a big body of work and understanding wisdom about joy for a lot of different reasons. Surely, in part because of the life that you have led. But I have to begin the question with, what's it like, growing up with Ramsey Lewis?
um, you know, Typically I answer that question because um, he's my father.
Yes.
Um, and so if you don't know any other father than your father, he's just your father. And so from the outside looking in, there's this idea of, Ramsey Lewis, what is it like? But he's dad. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And we did an interview for Father's Day together. And he said, I raised my kids. I didn't bring all of that show business home. When I was home, it was me and my family. And that's the way
Very
it was,
interesting.
man.
Wow.
It was
Wow.
cookouts. It was going to the movies. It was playing basketball in the backyard. And he could play too, man. He had a
Could he play? I
jump.
was going to ask. Yeah.
Oh man, he had a hook. He was no joke. He had a little issue with his shoulder. It would come out of the
Yeah.
socket, but he could play. But then the influence of music, right? So we all had to take music lessons. But then again, growing up, you just think that's natural because everybody in our household, we had to take piano, and then
Yeah.
you had to take piano, and then you had to
Yeah.
choose another instrument to play.
No kidding. And you
And
chose?
I chose drums because every other instrument was taken. I'm the youngest of seven. So
I don't think I knew that part.
I'm the youngest of seven. So
Wow.
there, guitar was taken, bass was taken, and a matter of fact, drums was taken. I was actually playing percussion, bongos and timbales and congas and cowbell
Love it.
because I just had to grab something quick.
Yeah.
Uh,
Before another kid came around, right?
so yeah, that's how it was.
But
Five,
so
5 years old. Yeah.
let me ask though. I mean, you must have, and I apologize because as a musician, I still don't mind humbling myself and being awed, by great musicians. But you must have met a few other, pretty amazing musicians as well, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And so Earth, Wind, and Fire was
Don't go
always
there.
playing by the house. Well, so a lot of people don't know this, but Maurice White was one of the original trio members in my dad's trio.
Oh,
So in the '60s, Maurice White was the drummer,
I
and
had no
it's
idea.
oh yeah, and it's a great story because he goes to my dad one day and he says, "Hey, I'm going to go start this band. I'm going to leave the group. I'm going to go start this band." And he goes off to California and he starts Earth, Wind, and Fire. I'll let my dad tell that story, but that's one of the people. Whenever they would come in town, they'd come in town, and it's there's Miles Davis. I mean, anybody. Because it was we would bring the instruments into the living room,
Yeah,
and folks would just come over and jam session. That's
that's
just the
incredible.
way it was.
Yeah,
Sammy
I was just
Davis,
thinking, Sammy Davis.
yeah, man. I mean, like,
Well, I completely loved the Rat Pack. I say I didn't listen to jazz, but I, did listen more to the standards type stuff, Frank Sinatra, and
yeah,
Sammy Davis Jr. and the rest. But yeah,
yeah, I love that. And matter of fact, one of my favorite artists is Nat Cole.
oh,
Of course, I didn't get to meet him, but he was a great piano player as well. So when I
hmm,
was younger and I was getting into singing and I was playing a little piano, my dad was like, "Man, you need to check out Nat Cole. The voice, the way that he accompanies himself. This
oh
is the
wow,
guy."
wow,
Yeah. So that
wow,
whole classic, we call it the American Standard, songbook.
yeah.
Those songs are beautiful. Nothing like it.
Yeah, yeah, no, no, you're exactly right. I mean, but I should say that because not most, but some of the listeners may have no idea who Ramsey Lewis is, and so if you don't, I'll just tell you. I mean, you just look him up yourself. But he really is. He's a legend. He's a legendary jazz musician, and I mean, we're talking about the creme de la creme when it comes to jazz musicians. So if you like jazz or maybe not familiar with Ramsey Lewis, you should go check him out. So and just finally, and then I want to move on to you. He just reached a milestone birthday, if I'm not mistaken.
86 this year.
Oh, 86. I thought it was 85, I guess. Wow. So, and he's doing well, I ask.
He's doing wonderfully well. He's retired, but he does once a month, the last Saturday of each month, he does a show called Ramsey Lewis Lounge. Um, I believe that. And Father, please, forgive me, Dad.
Because we're all coming up to see you next month, Dad. I mean, I'm just saying.
Yeah, but it is. It's actually online, so you can go to YouTube, you
Oh,
can go his Facebook page, and it's a $20 ticket. But that ticket, the proceeds go to help musicians who were hurting during the
oh man,
pandemic.
that's
Right,
terrific.
so every month he does it. That the proceeds go to help musicians, and he's doing it live from his living room. And every month it's a different catalog of songs, and it's just phenomenal.
I can imagine.
Yeah, it is a wonderful thing. And he loves it because he gets to engage with his music and prepare for a show.
Yeah,
And the world loves it. We have people in Japan, Europe, everybody, tuning in to listen to it. It's a
I can
wonderful,
only imagine.
yeah.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, I'll get that link from you and post it in the show notes afterwards so that we can do it.
Okay, bro.
So let's make a nice little smooth segue and just let me ask the big question, man.
Yeah,
Who is Bobby Lewis?
man. Bobby Lewis is a lover of the Lord, a husband, father, uh,
Amen.
and then whatever God gives me to share with the people from there, right?
Yes,
Um, I've learned through this journey of life that you never define yourself by any one thing, because at any time it can shift on you.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
And so
No,
you
that's the
always make
truth.
sure that the fundamentals are there, and you're always in tune with what's next. How do you approach life next?
Yeah,
You know, we were talking about growing up in music and playing the drums,
you
and
were born in Chicago, by the way.
born and raised in Chicago.
Okay.
Went to Chicago Academy for the Arts for high school. Well, first Kenwood and Hyde Park. So shout out to those folks. And then the Chicago Academy for the Arts. Always played the drums. I was playing the drums at a young age, and I really wanted to be a professional drummer. I mean, I just didn't think it was going to be anything else but being a professional drummer. And in high school, I told myself, I'm going to be a touring drummer and tour all over and play stadiums. And I ended up, my brother was the manager of a record studio in LA.
Hmm.
And that record studio was Death Row Records.
Whoa.
And yeah, so
Now, I
Dr.
knew that you had done some work with him, but I did not realize, I don't think I remember you telling me that your brother was running that thing.
Yeah,
Wow.
he was the studio manager there.
I
So
see.
he would make sure that Dr. Dre and Snoop Dogg and Tupac at one point, they all, you know, were taken care of well in their environment. And he called me one time, and I was in Chicago, and I was playing in a jazz club, and or playing jazz. Me and I told you there were seven of us. So another
Yeah.
brother,
You and the
Randy,
clan. Yeah.
we had a jazz trio. Yeah, I'm playing in Chicago, and he called and he said, "Man, look, you know, there's a lot going out here. If you come on out, you can play in the studio here, and you know, there's some opportunities." And I just got married, had a 6-month-old son, and I told my wife at the time, it's time to pack up. Got to go. You know, if I don't do it now, I don't know when I'll be able to do it. So we went out to LA, and I played. I was at Death Row for long enough to, you know, do some tracks there, um, meet and Dr. Dre and Snoop Dogg, um, and the at the time California Love. He was just creating California Love, which ended up being a huge hit with him and Tupac.
Hmm.
Um, and I then started to tour, um, and realized there was one moment we were in the Astrodome in Houston Astrodome, and I was looking out at sound check and just this huge arena,
Gosh.
and I was 24, about to be 25.
And you were playing with who then? Was it?
At that time, it was immature.
Okay.
It was an R&B festival, so it was immature, New Edition,
Oh
Parliament
wow.
Funkadelic,
Oh,
uh, Brandy.
I was
I
just
mean, it
talking
was
about
just,
Parliament yesterday.
bruh, it was just headline after headline. And it was during sound check, and I was looking out, and no one was in the arena. And it was literally just 8 years ago where I said I wanted to be a drummer playing in arenas, and here I was.
Wow.
But it didn't feel like I had achieved that moment. You know, I felt
Oh,
like that there was
interesting.
just so much more that I wanted to do, and I knew that this wasn't it, right? Um, and at that time, it was spiritual, or my relationship with God wasn't as strong as it is now. I knew that there was a calling, but I didn't know what that calling was. So I was going to church and I was doing other things, but um, at that time, I did not realize what God had in store
Yeah.
for me.
Yeah. May I
I
just
was,
ask real quick, Bobby, before you go on,
yeah.
that, in that world, and I, again, I haven't, well, let me just ask. I mean, you kind of walk a little bit of a thin line, don't you, when you're immersed in that world of, let's say, L.A., Tupac, immature, whatever it is. I mean, just the whole touring and all that sort of thing. Do you, does it feel like you have to walk a thin line if you're still thinking about God?
Thankfully, the group of individuals that I was playing with, they were all Christian individuals.
Okay, there you go. That
So it
makes it easier.
really helped as a
Yeah.
band unit that everyone believed in God, because there's
Hmm.
certain circumstances where, yes, it can be tough.
Yeah.
Um, so we all supported each other, to a degree. We prayed before shows, and made sure that we were always on the right track. So blessed from that standpoint.
Very
But
interesting. I see. Yeah.
and then I had also had a lot of insight from Dad. You know,
Yeah. Yeah.
where, here are the potholes. These are the things to look out for. Just go to the show and go
Wow.
back to the hotel room. Don't go to the after party. There's nothing at the after party. You know what I mean?
Wow. Got it.
So
Yes.
there's no reason to
But
do that.
that's the lure. That's the lure of being famous and touring is the, obviously the performance, but it's all the accolades, the notoriety, the after parties, people loving on you for whatever reason.
Yeah, and you can get caught up in that, right? I
Yeah.
mean, you can get caught up in, you're playing to 20, 30, 40, 50,000 people, and there's nothing like that feeling of
I
people
can
yelling
imagine.
and screaming. But one, you got to realize as the drummer, they're not there to see you. And then, but then two,
Poor drummers.
yeah. But then after that, you realize that everyone is there to experience what in their mind, what this concert is, what this music means to them, right?
Yeah,
And so you get out of the way. It's not you. You get out of the way of that
got it.
experience that they're having. And you come and you perform, you put on the best show that you can.
Yeah,
You go back to the hotel room and wait for the next, take the tour bus to the next gig and try to do that again. Um, but there is something that takes away. So I mentioned that I had a young son and pretty much newly married, and it took a toll on that.
got
It
it.
was hard.
Yeah,
At 25 years old, I didn't know who I wanted to be, and I don't know if you could tell in that story that I knew I wanted to be in music. I knew I wanted to perform, but as a man, um, and trying to balance that life, I didn't have all the tools. You know what I mean?
yeah.
And
That's a good way to say it, man. That you didn't have all the tools. I
no,
like that. Yeah.
no, and so our marriage didn't last. But I will say, thankfully, that my ex-wife and my current wife, they're friends, and we've always had a great relationship. We've always raised our son together the best that we knew how, and didn't. We never let the fact that our marriage didn't work hinder the idea that we're in this together. You know
Yeah,
what I mean?
man. I love that,
Um,
man.
and it's a special thing
Yeah.
because you don't usually get that after divorce and things like that.
Let me interrupt real quick here because I want to ask you, and I'll bring you back to your story. But when you talked about, you were young, you were 25, you didn't have the tools. I'm thinking about, and I know there are at least a handful of young people, maybe even watching now, like my daughter Alexandra, uh, who's 24. I mean, what do you say to young folks like this about going out into the world and my other daughter Christina and my son Kevin. You know how that is, right? You can't.
Hey man, yeah,
But can you imagine if your dad and my son, and my other son, I mean, it takes you 2 days to get through all your kids.
yeah.
But because you got to mention them all. I mean,
You better,
uh,
you're gonna hear it later, man. You better
but
hear it.
I mean, what do you say to them? I mean, what is your thoughts, or just any wisdom that you might say? They're out there, they don't have all the tools, nor should they necessarily. I mean, you get the tools, right?
You do,
And so,
and
I
it,
mean,
and
I'm just interested in your thoughts.
so you have to be honest about the experience that's acquired through 25 years on Earth.
Mm.
Right? I mean,
Mm-mm.
that's at the end of the day, that's what it is. My son that I've been talking about, that was a baby when I was 25, is now 26,
Oh
and
well.
he is going through his life's changes, and he's doing wonderfully well.
Yeah.
Um, but one of the things that I share with him is love and falling in love, right? And sharing your life with an individual. You have to have a life to share before you can say, I'm going to share my life,
Wow.
right?
Right.
And you have to know what that life is, and you have to
Hmm.
identify what that life is. And
Yeah.
because if you're not living the life that you want, and then you decide to share this thing that you have, how can you really say that you're going to be happy with who you are down the road, and that you don't even have what you want yet?
Very interesting.
So
Yes.
you've got to be comfortable in your own skin and have confidence of who you are and what you're doing, and say, okay, now I'm solid here. Now I'd like to share it. I don't know very many, and I'm sure there are, but I don't know very many 24, 25, 26 year olds that have all of that. It's
Right.
coming together because
Yes.
you graduated college, or you've experienced some life and you kind of know what you want to do.
Hmm.
But I give my son the advice of, you know, you have relationships, um, and you identify how you are equally yoked with people. Do you have the same ambitions? Do you have the same vision? Um, but make sure that you're comfortable sharing your space. There's nothing wrong with being selfish at that age.
Very
There's
interesting.
nothing wrong with just saying, hey, you know what?
Yeah.
I got to learn to take care of me.
Yeah. Yeah, no,
Yeah.
you're exactly right, and it's not necessarily, and the term might be right, being selfish, but it's a different connotation there. It's not like I'm a selfish person. It's
No.
that, to your point, you have to be a little bit more self-centered, let's just say, to do what you said, to build your life, and build a life that you are willing to share with somebody. It's a
Yeah.
very interesting way of looking at that.
Well, you know what? And you posted something earlier that it was a statement about don't let someone steal your joy.
Hmm.
And it, I reflect on that in this moment because the idea is if you are sharing your life with someone, um, but you don't know exactly what makes you happy, people are always pulling on you. I
Yeah.
want this from you. I want that
Yeah.
from you. I want you to
Yes.
be this in this moment to me, but you don't know how to find joy yourself or su- provide that.
Yeah.
It's almost you replace it with superficial experiences that kind of suffice the moment and don't add building blocks to the long-term relationship.
Yeah, man, that's just so well said. I like to, I don't really facilitate anymore, but I did a Sunday school, I facilitated a Sunday school for many years, and I used to say, I've come here to feed and be fed. you know,
Right.
right? And I think the same thing about relationships and whatever the case might be. That there's a synergy that should be taking place,
Yeah.
and entering into a marriage. That you. But to your point, if you have nothing to feed, there's nothing to feed, so there's nothing to share.
Right.
So, but if two come together and talk about, I want to feed and be fed, I mean, I think it's a beautiful thing. I
It
want to
is.
just a quick shout out to my sister, who I see who came online, and a
Hey,
few others.
sister,
So, Sharon,
sister Sharon.
Bill Brock is with us, and Rex, and David Stevens, all good. So nice to have you all here. Listen, so let me segue back to, so you were on the road, you weren't really feeling like fulfilled, if you will,
No,
and then what?
um, my wife at the time decided to leave California, come back to Chicago with my
Mm,
son, and that was a moment, a pivotal moment, because I could have decided to stay in California and continue to pursue music and be a long distance father,
yeah,
or go back to Chicago. And I
yeah,
chose to go back to Chicago. One thing, and so that's the experience with my dad. Like, no matter where he went around the world, he always came back home. He always had a relationship with me. And so I just could not, nothing was more valuable than having a relationship with my son and being in his life. Um,
man,
so back to Chicago I
that's
went.
rock solid, man. Yeah, yeah. And was it hard? I mean, you're leaving a pretty big life, right?
No,
L.A., lots of people. You spent what, 15 years there or something, didn't you?
I
Or
was
was it
on and
that
off
long?
15 years at
Oh, I see.
I mean, it was 7 years solid
Yeah,
living there.
yeah.
But
Okay,
then back and forth for a
I
while,
see.
trying to transition.
Yeah.
Um, but no, it wasn't hard because look,
Okay.
when you're left with the decision of it's either this child, or this thing that my baby boy Jordan um, loved more than anything in the world, all my children, and so and that comes back to that sacrifice. You know what I mean? It's you've got to choose what you're willing to sacrifice for joy.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And you've got
Yeah.
to be able to pay it forward. And there's just some things that
Yeah.
they are non-negotiables.
Yeah. Man,
Fatherhood is a non-negotiable.
say that again. About sacrifice for what?
Sacrifice for joy.
Man, it's true, right? It's
Right. Kevin, we sacrifice for so many other things, man.
yeah.
And I truly believe that one thing that we forget to do is we think that, well, after I sacrifice for this, then I'll be happy. After I
Yeah.
sacrifice for that, then I'll be happy. But why not put that primarily on the plate and say, look, I'm expecting joy right now. I need that while I'm going through. I need that while I'm planning. I need that while I'm preparing. I need that while I'm growing. I want joy now,
Oh
and I'm going
wow.
to keep that.
Man, and we talked about this last week, I think it was, and you have this incredible concept that I'm going to be asking you about in a second. So let me kind of push you through a little bit. So you moved back to Chicago, and I'm going to ask you maybe to just move through that and bring us up to where you're at today.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. So come
I,
back to
I say quickly, but
I'm
not really quickly. I want to make sure that we talk about this joy thing.
yeah. So my faith is growing. Faith is growing. Come back to Chicago, pretty much start all over again. Find myself working with Jesse Jackson. Faith is growing even greater. Build a media company outside of that, called Urban Access Media Group. Start working with McDonald's and Technicolor and a few other companies, major global companies. Meet my wife, Crystal, who is the love of my life, who God just blessed me with through that company and
Just scored
working
some
with
points
McDonald's.
there. Just saying. Yep.
Hey man, look.
Whenever you can, you got to score 'em. Go ahead, please.
She is that. She is that. Um, and I realized after doing that sometime, the brother who worked um, uh, for Death Row, he passed away. My mother passed away in that time, and I had an epiphanic moment, epiphany.
Hmm.
And, everything that I had done up to this moment had led me to speak on testimony and speak on how you maintain. Um, at that time, I didn't know it was joy. Now I do. How do you maintain purpose? How do you maintain when everything else is moving and ebb and flow and life is happening? How do you maintain consistency, right? And not be
Yes.
defined by the world, but defined by who God has you on this planet, so you can be more
Yeah.
effective in what you're doing and be effective to others. So that leads me to seminary and music and all the rest.
And as I recall, when I met you, excuse me, you were in the throes of your company. You were executive at that point, but you had started with seminary. I don't think you were going to McCormick.
No, I was at Loyola University.
Oh wow,
Yeah,
wow.
pastoral leadership. Um, and a couple different things happened that caused me to change to McCormick. One was in the denomination I'm in, the credits were not applicable. So
I
I was
see.
taking some courses and it just, they
Yeah,
weren't transferable.
yeah,
So
yeah,
I had to switch over. And,
yeah.
I
You
was
know,
two,
I'll tell you. I'm sorry.
I know I was going to say I was a year and a half into it, a little bit of
Wow,
investment into it. And they're like,
that's
no, we don't take that.
wow. You know, I remember in our conversation, Bobby, that you know, if I may say this, okay, we were almost for that entire hour, an hour and a half, almost like counseling or coaching each other back and forth. And I would say that I got more of the counseling than I did the counseling. But you did ask me, I remember, about you going to seminary. You were saying that you didn't know if being like a pastor or a preacher sort of was the thing,
Right.
and you asked, what's the next level, or what's the, and and I don't remember exactly how it all evolved, but we ended up saying that to some degree it was the dialogue.
Yes.
We kind of talked about it was, and I think I mentioned that, oftentimes I'm in church and listening to a pastor and they say something and I kind of would go, raise my hand, excuse me, I just have a question real quick,
Can we, right, right.
Yeah,
What's
yeah.
the
Can we just stop? Just hold on. Just I need some clarification on that. And we kind of talked about that it was, somehow in the form of dialogue or whatever the
Yeah.
case might be. I don't know what all
Well,
that means, but I
I'm
just
gonna tell
remember
you,
that discussion. Yeah.
it was a lot of my to the interest to what you do and what you were doing at the time. To me, was like, wait a minute, there's some connection here. Like,
Mm,
you know, um, to speak into people's lives,
yes.
to help them be better tomorrow than they are today. That's what you
Yes.
were doing.
Yes.
That's what this walk is all about.
Yes.
Um, and I was stuck in because my aunt founded our church 50 years ago.
Mm.
Um, and my only understanding of pastor or Christian leadership was, well, you got to be on a corner of a church,
Yeah.
inside a building, and build your flock from there.
Yeah.
We hadn't really gotten to a point of having this virtual church the way that it is right now, or building out,
Yeah.
how you can engage in church anywhere. Technology wasn't there when we were talking back then,
Right. Right. No,
global
that's true.
churches,
That's right.
churches weren't
Yeah.
really willing to go that way anymore,
Amazingly, you're exactly right.
right?
Yeah.
Uh,
Wow.
so now it is, it's connecting with people
Yeah.
wherever we can.
Yes.
Yeah.
Boy, that's the bottom line. And I will say, I don't mean to be shamelessly here promoting, but I did. I've actually been doing this a long time, but I never really sort of gravitated to the traditional keynote type speaking, where you show up and nothing wrong with it, but and you develop and you deliver a motivational speech or whatever the case might be. I always wanted to talk to the audience, and
Right.
I found myself even in larger audiences going, man, I got to get out here with you all and just stand next to you and say, hey, what do you think about this?
Hmm.
And it's magical. It's like you really don't even need to know what you're talking about. You just show up and ask a few questions, and people
Oh
will
man,
light it up.
man, man. See, now you just pulled a page out of scripture, man. You
Uh
just
oh,
show
I
up and
didn't
let
know that.
God do his thing.
Yeah, don't ask me about scripture because I can't remember my name half the times, let alone scripture.
Yeah, I think, and it's strong to what you said. It's never about you, right? It's never about you being on a stage and
Yeah,
delivering that. It's
yeah,
all about the connection.
yeah,
Um, and
yeah. Mm,
it's always what you just said
mm,
is what Jesus did. Just let
mm,
me put it to you like that.
mm,
He
mm,
didn't decide to stand in the synagogue or decide to
mm,
stand in on a
mm.
in the pulpit and preach
Yeah,
from a place. He said, "No,
yeah,
I need to be next to the people. I
yeah,
need to
yeah,
find out what the people are going through so I can deliver to them what they need." Right.
yeah.
And
Wow.
so you have to um, find that connection.
Yeah.
That's what we're here for.
Man, that's just too powerful. Well, listen, so I want to ask you, and just thanks for all that and giving me the latitude to just explore, your life and just other wisdom that has just been jumping out here. But tell me about joy. Where did you sort of get this whole connection? This sort of, I wouldn't say connection, I'm sorry, this, I guess you could say it's a lane in a sense, that you've gone down this lane of Joy's journey and speaking about joy and
Yeah.
this whole thing. Just introduce our audience to what that's all about.
There was a time, it was probably about 3 or 4 years ago, where my wife and I had just started being foster parents, and our lives were changing, but we weren't changing. I mean, we were excited. And I mentioned to her, this is joy. Like, this is, and it's
Mm,
always joy. The journey of joy, where you are in life, may change,
mm,
but this thing, joy, lives in it
mm,
always. And it's up to us to choose that and not choose a circumstance. And it doesn't even matter if that circumstance is good, bad, or indifferent, right? The idea is that joy is always in the room. And with that,
wow.
will always give you it will always give you a way to make things better for everyone around you. And
Wow.
so if you choose to focus on one of these things that's in your life, whether it be job, family, kids that can move, that can throw you off. But if you choose to find joy through it, then you won't get thrown off.
Wow.
So I call it Joy's Journey because it's truly not just the journey through our lives, but it's the journey of joy through humanity. It's the journey of joy through this world that we are all fighting for for joy, for being better tomorrow. It's
Yes.
just sometimes we get distracted by the noise, and that noise takes us down a path that sometimes doesn't lead us to a smile or treating each other the right way.
Guilty.
Right? And so
And you discern though the difference between joy and happiness, right? Or being happy, right? That those are kind of different concepts a little bit.
yeah, yeah.
That joy is enduring, right? It's just it should, even in hard times, it's not like you're, well, that's happy right there. So it's not that, but there's still something underneath where the joy still exists.
Joy comes because I can take a breath this morning.
Well then.
Happiness comes because I may have gotten a nice scoop of ice cream, right? Or when I went to the ice cream shop, I asked for one scoop and they gave me two.
Wow. Yes.
You know what I mean? Like,
Yes.
so
Yes.
you can
That made
blow
me
that
happy.
out.
Yes. Yeah.
But joy essentially is the fact that you have the ability to participate not only in your own um, evolution, your own exchanges, and the capacities to do that, but then you also then realize that you have others that you can share it with, that love
Mm.
you, that you
Mm.
want to share it with.
Mm.
Now, however those things turn out, whatever you're doing together, it doesn't matter because you're doing it together. You have the capacity to do it. And what we forget about is how precious life is. And when it's taken away, whatever those capacities are, then you're praying, you're on your knees and you're praying to God, right?
Yes. Been there, done that. Yep.
So
Seriously. Yeah.
let us not forget that
Yeah.
it is the ability to open our eyes and breathe in the morning, should that simple thing should bring us joy. And then as we think about how we're engaging in the world throughout the day, those things on how to engage with joy will then start manifesting itself.
Wow. Okay. So I'm trying to decide where I want to go. I want to talk about your book, Joy's Journey, and some of that
Yeah.
idea too. But I also want to ask you about this idea that about, you know, bringing joy with you,
Yeah.
when you walk out of the house. I mean, to me, it's such a powerful kind of a metaphor, but it's so practical to help people understand how to bring joy with you. I mean, just sort of gives you
Yeah.
this way of thinking about it.
Yeah.
Would you share that?
Absolutely, absolutely. So as I was saying, waking up in the morning and just taking a deep breath and realizing, all right, this is a beautiful day. It started off real well. I'm breathing. Uh, but the idea of um, how so I mentioned earlier, what will we sacrifice for joy? So you start off your day thinking, well, what am I going to sacrifice to have joy myself, right? So is it the negative thought? Is it, you know, whatever those things are that can, you said, steal your joy? Is it
Mm.
getting rid of that and sacrificing that space so that I may have joy?
Mm.
You put that in your backpack. You
And your
put that in your
backpack.
toolkit, right? Now,
So you're talking about getting up, you're getting ready to leave, and you're packing a backpack.
you are. And the thing is that you don't want to get distracted. You don't want to wake up in the morning thinking about what you didn't do, should do, could do for others before, because we were talking about
Mm-hmm.
relationships, and you're
Yep.
24 years old and being able to share of yourself, right?
Mm-hmm.
You have to be able to grab a hold of and choose joy yourself first thing in the morning. Right? Here's the things that I'm going to let go over, and there's that prayer of serenity, things that I can't change,
Yes.
things that I can, and let me know the difference between the two. Lord, thank
Mm-hmm.
you. Right?
Mm-hmm.
And so you practice that so that you can breathe and know that it's going to be okay, whatever those things are out there. Then, if you have a husband, wife, significant other that you're sharing a space with, whatever that, even if it's a physical space or you're in relationship, you think of, what can I do to bring them joy? What can I sacrifice that I know that they may need, that I know that they may want. And it doesn't have to be physical things. It might be even at that moment, sending a text or making a call and just saying, I love you, or rolling over and giving your wife, husband a kiss. I love you, baby. You're the best.
Yeah.
Right?
This is
That
not complicated, is it?
it's not. It's not. It's not at all. And I tell you, it makes all the difference in the world. And it's the simple sacrifices that we make of one another that can change and give a paradigm shift to the environment that we're in. So then we move on to kids, or you might even you might not have kids, you might have a pet, right? But this is that next level of, all right, so what will I sacrifice of myself to make sure my kids, or the next level, will fulfill that joy, right?
Including your own, like you wake up, you're in a really bad mood.
Yeah.
Why wouldn't we sacrifice that to make, and listen, I mean, I'm not a morning person. My wife, when she wakes up, she's asleep. She's like, good morning. And But to your point, I can decide to sacrifice
That anger.
my, yeah, my anger, or just my moodiness in the morning, and
Yeah.
decide
I'm gonna
to
let
say
that
good
go.
morning. Yeah.
Right. And just say good morning, right? Whatever, and
Yeah.
don't blame it on, well, I've got so much on my mind and work is all this and then
Right.
no, there's more
Yeah.
than enough time for all of that.
Sacrifice
You
it.
know what I mean? But it comes to ultimately your sacrifice for joy.
Yeah.
And I'll say again, Kevin, that we sacrifice all the times for the things that we want. I'm just saying, don't, if you really want joy, don't you want joy? Don't, if it's not, it's in the room, it's right there next to you. It's there all the time.
Yeah.
It just takes you focusing on it and grabbing a hold of it.
Yeah.
So you move on through the course of your day, or your thoughts of the course of your day, from family to work to interactions, and even to the stranger that you have not met yet and don't even know is going to come across you in your life, and you pack something for that person. And it could be anything from $1 to make sure that if there's a homeless person, to just the ability to speak when you see someone on the street and your eyes contact, that you just say, good morning, hello. You're preparing to pass on joy. You're preparing for that engagement. You're preparing for that encounter. And when you do that in advance, people feel it.
Yeah.
And the atmosphere shifts, the atmosphere changes, and the weight that's on you changes. You'll find an amazing thing that's happening in your life, that now things are starting to shift and take shape in a joyful way.
That's amazing. And the paradigm or the principle is that you're not going to give or share joy to get joy. You share joy, and it's a natural consequence of that, right?
Exactly. Exactly. It is just the natural byproduct. When you share joy, you get joy.
You get joy. I loved what you said, though, when we were talking before, this idea of when you're packing your proverbial bag, and I guess maybe it's your mind, and heading out the door for the day. Remember, you were telling me something about that, what are you packing in that bag? And are you packing enough joy in there to be able to share it? And kind of what you were saying here now, that if you've packed it, in other words, the idea that, if I understand you, is that you're packing it means you are preparing and you are intending to bring joy throughout your day. And so when you come across that person, you're reaching in your backpack and you're saying, here's some love, or
Yeah.
or here's just a moment, to chat.
Absolutely. And I think we do this naturally. I would say, how many times have we walked out of the door with our cup of coffee and there's a conversation that you need to have with somebody at work, and you're like, boy, I'm going to let them have it today. You're putting that in your backpack. Why would you put that in your
Love that.
backpack?
Yes.
You know
Yes.
what I mean? Like,
Yes.
hey, put put the good conversation, put the healthy conversation, pour into someone, even if those things haven't been as great as you would like them to be. You be the catalyst with joy to make that paradigm shift and make that change, right? You don't be the one that's carrying around the negativity. Don't be the one that it decides to put the weight on your back. You
Yeah.
release it with joy.
Yeah.
And so
Wow.
with when you're walking out of the house, like you say, with your backpack, your toolkit, if it's filled with interactions of joy, then you are filling the world with that.
Yeah. It's there.
But
It's a matter of just reaching, right?
yeah,
And
that's right.
handing it.
That's right. And when see, you're saying it again, reaching. That's the sacrifice,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
You have to give that joy out to
Yeah.
receive it.
Yeah.
And
I go ahead, please, please.
well,
Please.
and I would also say that in our faith, a lot of people, well, when I get to heaven, oh, it's going to be great. It's all going to be wonderful, But God wants us to have heaven on earth.
Yeah, we hope that'll be a few years away. So what are you going to do? What's happening until then?
What's happening until then? It's not all suffering. You know what I mean? Like you can have heaven on earth if you choose it.
Man, and you're gonna somebody's gonna have to help me out here if you don't know it off the top of your head. But what's the scripture about? That surpasses understanding. What is that one?
Oh,
Come on, my
yeah,
sister knows it.
yeah,
And while you're looking, I'm gonna just say I'm gonna just make a quick shout out to your point that, for some of us, it's not, maybe I'll just say myself,
Philippians 4:6.
Philippians 4:6, and how's it go?
And the peace that surpasses all understanding, regard your hearts and minds in Christ Jesus.
Yeah, I guess, and I think about peace, I was thinking about joy, though. I mean, you could almost replace peace and joy. Those
Yeah,
two words almost go together, that you could put joy in the place of peace.
yeah,
That to your point, that, from a Christian standpoint, this is part of what, and here's where I was kind of going with this, is that, the two people, frankly, that on a very regular basis epitomize this for me, sort of model it for me, are my sister Sharon and my wife Jane.
ah,
That they 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 seem to be in this constant state of joy, and I'm not putting pressure on them to be that. It's just that.
yeah,
And it's hard to not be joyful around them. I mean, that's really the truth. And I will also say that, as I thought about our conversation, and I've thought about it many times over the years, that that is what I experienced in our conversation, was a lot of joy. And we talked even about some hard subjects, about your brother Kevin, and
yeah,
some other things. But I guess the point that I was going to make, Bobby, is that, it's not, people have different sort of mindsets. And I don't know, I think some of it might be biological, but, I mean, whether it's, nature or nurture, I don't really know. But the point is that some people do have a little bit more negative or skeptical or cynical bent to them.
yeah,
It's not as natural to walk out and say, okay, here's all the joy toys,
right,
whereas others do seem to have a little bit more. But to your point, anybody can anybody can develop that. Anybody can intend that.
yes, and it is about the practice, right?
There it is.
And when you say intent, and what is your intention? So one of the examples that I was thinking while you were talking,
Mm-hmm.
my wife and I have never argued, and we don't argue on purpose. There's nothing
Mm-hmm.
worth arguing about.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
relationship is the long goal.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Like there's nothing at all going on in our lives that's worth me raising my voice to her or her raising her voice to me.
Yeah.
Hey, it just, you know, we can, if you want this, all right, fine, you can have it. Or I want, you know, we work it out, and we might have a disagreement, but we still talk it out. But there's nothing worth arguing or fighting over,
Yeah.
because the intention is, I don't want to hurt you, and I want to love you through all of
Right.
this. And the long
Yes.
game is what we have in store. So it
Yes.
is what it is your intention. Do you want joy to be a part of your life? Or are you willing to sacrifice joy to get this short term goal? Now, and then you have to face those consequences as
Wow.
well.
Yeah.
You
And
know what
that's
I
what
mean?
arguing is about.
That's
Is
what
yeah.
it is.
No, you know, if you're arguing, you're looking, you know, intentionally or unintentionally to win, and therefore sacrificing joy to get that win, if
And
you
then
will.
you get that win, and somebody says, "Okay, you won,"
Yeah.
and now
Yeah.
what do you have?
And now what you got? Yeah, nothing. It sucks. Well, listen. Let me ask if you will just move on. There's a couple other things, and I know we're already into an hour. Are you still okay?
I'm good, man.
Okay. I mean, I want to spend a few more minutes here, and
Yeah,
because there's a couple more things I want to ask you about. One is more about Joy's journey,
yeah.
the books, and sort of this whole lane that you have here. Tell me just a little bit more about Joy's journey, the book, and these sorts of things. Because I
Well,
have some, I think I told you I've got some. In fact, I'm going to put it up on here now, and maybe you can just describe it. Sorry for my distraction here. Let me see if
mhm.
I can just get it up on
Yeah, the idea about JoysJourney the ministry is to
it's
just
the ministry. Thank you.
produce, yeah, produce content that will help us make that decision to choose joy.
Yes.
And so in the book Joy's Journey, it's really written about my youngest daughters. They are the characters, but Joy and her little sister. Um, but they were actual conversations that I had with my daughters
Mm.
that sparked, that helped me to understand joy in a child's life. Their their
Wow.
their perception of everything. It was very easy for them to figure out where they're going and what they want to do and how they want to do it. And if they want to be a bird or an astronaut, I can do it. You know what I mean? And there was no
Wow.
block. There was no
Wow.
there's no barrier. There's no fear. It
Wow.
was just all about continuing this. Hey, I'm happy, and I want to continue to be happy. So I'm going to
Wow.
choose to be happy.
Wow, that's fascinating. You know, this one here, and I did read the book. I can't remember because there's like several stories in there, but which story
Yeah,
goes with which. But I just picked out a few pages that really resonated with me, and there's a couple of things. One, so I'll just read this for those who might be, I don't know, might maybe just listening on an iPhone or something like this. But of course, it shows two kids playing. I suppose it's Joy and her younger sister.
yeah,
And it says, Mommy said, they're playing just like you and your little sister run and play. Birds, oh, because she was asking about the birds, I think.
right,
Yeah.
exactly.
And so Mommy said that they're playing just like you and your little sister run and play. Birds can't run like you, but they can fly in the sky. Joy said, Daddy, I want to fly.
Yeah.
I mean, that's fabulous. You know, the other thing though that really caught my attention about this illustration here, and you said the illustrations were by your cousin, right?
My cousin, Barbara Monley. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Well, I just thought to myself, you know, that one child is playing the game. They're both playing the game, but one looks up out to the window and experiences the joy of watching birds fly.
yeah.
You know,
You're
I mean, it's this concept of being in life, being curious and paying attention. You know, my daughters, I physically taught them both how to, especially my oldest daughter, when we were in California where she was born. I remember when she was about 2, I think, something like that, that I used to walk her around the block just to teach her how to smell roses, how to stop and smell
yeah,
roses.
yeah.
And this became a thing, you know.
Hmm.
And I did that with both of my daughters, and I don't know what the outcome of it is, but it this photo, this illustration reminded me of that your daughter saw the birds and took the moment to notice this amazing work of God, if you will,
Yes,
or whatever.
yes. And the idea that I want that happiness. I see them out there playing. I want to do something like that, Daddy.
Yeah.
Right? I want to fly.
I want to
And
fly.
and in that story, it goes. I think so. The conversation went on to say, "Baby, you can't fly." This has actually happened in our car, and I said, "Sweetheart, you can't fly, but astronauts fly, and you can fly in a rocket ship." And
Yeah.
she says, "Yeah, Dad, that's what I want to do. I want to fly in a rocket ship." And when she's putting all this together to gain that, that understanding of, and through it, she's realizing I can be anything that I want to be. That's where it takes me. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like,
Yes.
to
That's right.
achieve this goal,
That's right.
I'll be an astronaut.
That's
You
right. Oh
know?
man. I mean, that's just, really, you're introducing your daughters to possibility thinking,
Yes.
and listen, we will all, right, at some stage, we will all learn what our limitations are, but we don't have to have these false, as we call them, limiting beliefs in our mind about what is possible.
Right.
Until you see it's like maybe physically impossible. If you want to be, a pilot or an astronaut, perhaps there's a certain age, I mean, not age, but a height requirement. But the point is that those are things that you discover, on your own, and you don't need to thwart it before
Yeah.
it's discovered.
That's
Because
right.
the concept is possibility thinking, is be able to think that so many things are possible in your life.
All right, and all things are possible. So
Eh,
it when I wrote this book, Jeff Bezos hadn't decided, or nor had the man from Virgin Airlines decided to go to space. So even the height requirement isn't there anymore, right?
Right. That's a good point. Yeah, exactly right. No, that's exactly right.
All of those things that
Yeah.
NASA said,
Yeah.
it's not even there. So it is that, brother. Like, I think I learned a lot from this book and the conversations,
I can
because
imagine.
they 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 were the ones that kept on pushing their understanding of, okay, well, then all I have to do is this. And so yeah, we can all sit on the moon, Daddy, because we had just come from a picnic,
Hmm.
and they loved the picnic, right? So they're in their minds, we're going to do everything that we love to do.
Oops.
We're
Hold
gonna
on. Yeah. My bad. Let
we're
me get
going
this
to
back. Go ahead.
Yeah, that's good. I'm gonna put the whole family. We're riding in the car. In her mind, we're gonna put everybody in the rocket ship, go to the moon, and have this picnic. Yeah, let's do it.
I mean, the illustration itself just really does kind of epitomize joy. I mean, without even reading it or knowing the story, I can look at this and go, yeah, there's some real, that looks like it's filled with joy. Sitting on the moon with your family, by yourself, just looking at the stars. I mean, that's
And
amazing right there.
isn't that the beauty? Like when you were walking
Yeah.
with your daughter around the block, the discovery in her eyes, the
Yes.
beauty in her eyes.
Yes.
You know,
Yes.
like, that's what we hold on to. That's what we want to nurture.
Yes.
Those are the feelings that really mean something. You know what I mean? That
Yeah.
also that also promote like possibility, that new discovery. And so, yeah, I mean, writing this book was just a joy. Yeah, and they wrote it really. I was just writing down our conversations and
Yeah.
letting those conversations go.
That's amazing. That's amazing. And then you have this one here, which just cracked me up when I read through this book. Can you just kind of quickly talk about this? I mean, I
Yeah.
thought in fact, I had written myself a note that said, now that's a parent, paying attention right there when it rounded off to this. So can you just quickly tell the
Yeah,
folks about
absolutely.
this?
So, my daughter, it was around Halloween, and I think we saw Wizard of Oz, and she had this affinity toward a witch in a broom,
Yeah.
and she was riding around on the broom, and she said, I want to be a witch. And I said, well, how about an angel? Angels can ride brooms. And she said, yeah, I'm an angel on a broom.
I mean,
and then
that's
she just ran off riding, and then she just kept on saying, I'm an angel on a broom. I'm an angel on a broom.
I mean, that just
Incredible.
it cracked me up when I saw this because it just really I just thought now there's a parent paying attention to what's going on in the mind of a child, and putting
Yeah,
really a beautiful spin on it. Well, listen, anything else that you would say about Joy's Journey? I'm certainly going to be asking you at the end about where people can find out more about this ministry.
yeah, yeah. I just say that keep joy in your heart.
Yeah.
It is always close by. It's always in the room. Grab a hold of joy whenever you can and hold on tight.
And it is a journey, isn't it?
It is.
Yeah.
It is.
Listen, I'm going to make sort of a hard turn here because I also want people and to experience a little bit of your music. Again, I know that you were raised, uh, by an incredibly legendary musician, but you're an accomplished musician too, and you've put out some music.
Yeah.
I've heard at least one cut from it called "I'm a Worshiper," and I'm about to show us. Can you tell us just a little bit about it before? It's not the full cut, but I think people will get. If you don't feel joy watching this, I don't know what to say. But go ahead.
This is just that proclamation, that we're here to worship. We're here to celebrate the Lord, celebrate life, celebrate the gifts that He's given us. And you don't need anything else. Claim that over yourself, over your circumstance. Um, I'm a worshiper. That's
And
it.
where did you is that where you came up from the sort of the title that I'm a
Yeah,
worshiper?
well, there's a scripture, and God, now is the time for true worshipers.
I see.
And I believe that now is the time not to hide, right? But to really show the world that I'm a worshiper, that, there's the proclamation of, regardless of what I'm going through, regardless of what we're going through, I am going to worship the Lord. And that worship piece is joyful, right? That worship piece is, it pushes down all the negativity and lifts up the positivity. It
Yeah.
pushes down everything that is coming against you and lifts up everything that
Yeah.
God's possibilities. Um, and so when you make that claim over your life, it really is empowering.
This is incredible, Bobby, because I think to myself that, I was just thinking as you were saying that, that sometimes we have this mindset, maybe, that to be a worshiper, if you will, that takes place when you're in the spirit, or when you got your let's say your faith groove going on, when
Yeah,
you're connected with God, when you've been going to church regularly, you're doing Sunday school, and you're kind of in this flow of your Christian life. But on the other hand, I think to myself, listen, I mean, I'm as bad as anybody, when it comes to ebbing and flowing with my not my faith, so to speak, but my Christian walk. I guess you could put it that way. And as they say, we all fall short. I think I had mentioned to you that my father passed, back in April.
which
And
is
the one thing that I always thought about him, and he was an imperfect man, but I always wanted to say about him, and this was true, that no matter whether he was stumbling, I mean, just foolishly stumbling as a Christian, or whether he was lifted as in whatever the circumstance, he always suggested very loudly that he was a worshiper.
Amen.
Again, I mean, we could be sitting somewhere having a beer, and maybe he had one or two too many. I'm just making this up as an example.
Yeah.
He'd still, he'd
Well,
still claim Jesus' name.
that's what, and it's important that you say that, Kevin, because we're not hiding from God. You know what I mean? Like,
Good point.
no matter what you're doing, there's
Yeah,
no way you can turn off
yeah,
the switch and say, okay,
yeah,
God's not seeing this, or
yeah, yeah,
today I'm not a Christian, or
yeah.
today I'm not following the will of God. Look,
Right. Today I'm not good enough. Yeah, yeah,
yeah,
yeah,
right. I
yeah.
mean, the thing is that God created the universe. He created us. We're all participating in this
Yes,
thing. He's giving us the understanding of choosing the difference, right? To choose
yes,
joy, to choose Him, or choose another
yes,
way. So
Yes.
we're in this space where if you're going to choose God, if you're going to choose joy, you're
Yeah.
choosing a life that you want to be better tomorrow than you are today. You're not going to be perfect doing
Yes.
it. Don't think you're going to be perfect doing it, but shout out loud and proclaim it loudly that, hey, I'm trying to be better tomorrow than I am
Yes.
today.
Yes.
Anybody in
Yes.
on that game, come on and join me. I'm a
Okay.
worshiper.
So with that perfect segue, I'm just going to let those who are watching and who will watch later just catch a little piece of this here.
Where my worshipers at? To your feet, here we go. Come on, put your hands together, give God the praise. With every breath, give praise to the Lord. He's made a way, He saves the day. Hey. Now here we stand with another chance. Let us shout out loud, 'cause He's worked it out. Come on.
Let everything that has breath praise the Lord.
We lift your holy name, 'cause I'm a worshiper.
I'm a worshiper, worshiper, worshiper.
I'm a worshiper.
Worshiper, worshiper,
Yeah.
worshiper.
And
Will praise Him
praise Him
with all my
on my
heart. Worshiper, worshiper.
I'm a worshiper. Give Him the glory, 'cause He writes every story. Shout victory. He's the King of Kings. Hey. We walk by faith and not by sight. Trust in His might. He's the guiding light. Hey, come on.
Let's sing and dance, give praise to the Lord.
We bless your holy name. Sing.
I'm a worshiper,
Yeah.
worshiper, worshiper.
Oh, I'm a
Worshiper, worshiper, worshiper. Will praise Him with all my heart. Worshiper, worshiper, worshiper.
where my worshipers at? Come on, y'all.
Worshiper,
Hey, where my worshipers at? I will praise Him with all my heart. I'm a worshiper. Come on, y'all. Get up out your seats. Come on, let's worship. God is great and worthy to be praised. God is great. We proclaim. Did He give you shelter from the rain?
shelter from the
When
rain.
you were lonely, did He show you love? Now let's praise the Heavenly Father above. Come on, let's worship. Hey,
Worshiper, worshiper, worshiper.
I'm a worshiper.
I mean, oh, oh wow. I mean,
Man, I'm gonna tell you that. So Percy Beatty, producer, gospel musician, just blessed to have him produce the album in the camp. The musicians that were on it. That was my home church, the home choir,
wow.
and man, I'm in
Wow.
tears.
No, I mean, I can imagine. In fact, my sister made a big shout out saying, "Woohoo! Hallelujah! Love that song." I mean,
Uh,
well, I mean, it really epitomized a nice little closing to this conversation because there's two things that bring joy. Not two. There's more than two things, but I'm saying about that song, and one is just the uplifting feel to it, and the passion behind even the performance. I mean, you can see a fake performance when a fake performance, and that was far from it by everybody there. But then, of course, the other part is just the actual message of I'm a worshiper, and the joy that you're getting from saying that.
yeah, yeah, and just trying to share that message.
Yeah,
I think Joy's journey, like I said, the ministry is to just create content, books,
yeah,
music, engaging content that just
yeah,
reminds us how
yeah,
special we are today.
yeah,
Don't
yeah.
let anything else get in the way of that in your life.
Man, Bobby, where can people go to learn more about Joy's journey, or anything about about your work and your ministry and this, that, and the other?
Yeah, absolutely. So Instagram is Bobby Lewis. Facebook is Joy's Journey and Bobby Lewis. They're all linked, so you get the same information there.
Okay.
Twitter is Bobby Lewis JJ.
Okay,
Um,
Bobby Lewis JJ. We'll
yeah,
put all of these in the show notes, but yes,
absolutely. And the website, which will be relaunched next week, is
nice.
JoysJourney.life.
JoysJourney.life. Okay.
Yeah.
Now, also, if people are just interested in the book, Joy's Journey, where can they find that?
Yes. The book is on Author House.
Author House? Okay.
Yep, authorhouse.com, and you just
And
type in Joy's
just,
Journey.
yeah, authorhouse.com. Again, we'll put all of this in the show notes. Well, listen, I'll be honest with you, and we kind of said this earlier and even last week that we had to be really, really careful. I will say for me, man, we could go into so many different directions that I
I
could do
know
this for a few hours.
for our conversations, man, we've been kind of surface, man. We could go
Exactly
to a
right.
few other things.
So, anyways, maybe there's another interview in the future where we can just say, okay, what do we want to talk about, and just
and,
go
and drill down. I'd
drill
love to do
down.
that, man.
Yeah.
I'd love to do that. I love sharing
Well,
time with you, bro.
no, listen, it's a complete pleasure, Bobby. Thank you so much. Give our best to your family, and just thank you so much for being a part of this conversation in Grow Yourself podcast.
Thank you, Kevin.
All right, my good friend and my brother. We'll talk to you soon then, okay?
All right, buddy.
All right. So listen, everybody, I hope you enjoyed that. I said to myself I was going to try to keep these things around an hour. I mean, there you have it. I guess people can leave when they leave, but when the flow happens, you just keep going, and so that's what I'm going to do. Is I'm going to keep trying to do that, and people, when they leave, they can come back and watch it before. I just want to emphasize again that if you have some topics, and of course this was a very faith sort of oriented topic, but I don't limit it to that. I make no bones about my faith and this, that, and the other. But on any scale, I would ask if you have some ideas, some thoughts about, whether it be a guest or whether it be a topic that we could bring to Grow Yourself podcast that you believe would help others learn and grow, change, improve in life. Again, their personal, professional, spiritual life. Please, many of you all are my friends here. Send me a short note or a long note and just let me know any thoughts that you have that you would be interested in. Likely, if you are, others will be. So again, thanks so much to my special guest, Bobby Lewis, and I genuinely appreciate all of you all that have hung with me here today, and all of you who might listen or watch this later on. Hope you have a great and wonderful day and week. I'm out of here. God bless. Take care.